The air in the clinic was sharp with antiseptic. Too clean, too fast. I sat on the edge of the paper-covered exam table, the metal beneath cold enough to pull a grunt from my throat if I let it. I didn't. Dr. Langford barely glanced at me, just flicked through the pages of my chart like he was swiping at flies. Pages I'd seen a dozen others flip through before him. They all read the same words, made the same assumptions. He sighed. Not a tired sigh, not a thoughtful one. The kind that says, "You're wasting my time." "Mr. Mitchell," he said sharply, like I was a private again, out of step. "Nothing here explains your complaints. Maybe you're just not as tough as you used to be." I stared at the floor. Gray tile, scuffed in the corners. My palms pressed down on the table's edge. I could feel the tremble in my fingertips. Not from fear, from pain. The kind that lived deep in the spine, that settled into the bones like frost. I didn't answer. I never do. Not when the words would only fall flat. He muttered something about a referral, tapped at his screen, and left the room without saying goodbye. The door clicked behind him, sealing me into that small, windowless space that smelled of nothing human. I sat for a while, long after the nurse came and went, telling me I could get dressed. Long after the sounds of footsteps and beeping machines faded. I pulled my coat over my shoulders, slow. The pain stiffened everything. A straightening of the spine sent fire through my back and down my legs. I bit down on it. They didn't know what it took to stand without showing. Outside, the reception area buzzed. Phones rang. A mother hushed a crying child. My name wasn't called again. I was just another form to be filed, another ghost walking out of a building that never knew me. That night, I stared at the ceiling fan in my trailer back in Stillwater. The blades turned slowly. The pain wouldn't let me sleep, and I kept hearing his voice. "Maybe you're just not as tough as you used to be." I closed my eyes, and the night came back. The one in Kandahar. The one that changed everything. The night was blacker than ink. Kandahar, 2007. We'd been running ops all week, barely time to sleep, barely time to think. But that night was worse. It was a route we'd done before, a known stretch. Known risk. Didn't matter. 1 second we were riding in silence, dust in our mouths. The next, the sky cracked open. The IED hit the second Humvee dead on. Fire. Screams. Smoke so thick you couldn't see your own hands. I hit the ground hard, my back twisting under the weight of gear and impact. I remember the taste of blood in my mouth. Couldn't tell if it was mine. Maybe I didn't want to know. Someone was calling for help. A young voice. Wounded. I knew who it was. Private Callahan. Just a kid. He'd only been with us a month. I found him about 20 yards off the road, both legs broken, bleeding out fast. No one else was nearby. Radio was dead. The blast had taken out more than just the truck. Reinforcements weren't coming. Callahan was crying for his mother. "You hear that, and you don't forget it." I pulled him onto my back, wrapped what I could to stop the bleeding, cinched a field tourniquet to each thigh with shaking hands. My body screamed with every step I took, but I didn't stop. You don't leave your own in the dirt. It took nearly 5 miles to reach the forward outpost. I passed out just after I got him through the wire. Woke up 2 days later in the barracks with nothing more than Tylenol and a gnaw. "You're lucky," the medic said. "Nothing shows on the x-ray. Just bruised." I didn't argue, didn't ask for more tests. That was the way it was. You got up. You got back out. I figured the pain would pass. But it didn't. I carried that weight, Callahan, the blast, the silence from command, every day since. And now, 30 years and 3 wars into my bones, I could barely get out of bed in the morning without bracing against the wall. But every time I showed up at a clinic, they told me the same thing. Age-related discomfort. That phrase made me feel small, like I'd imagined the hurt, like the cost of those years had been misplaced in someone else's file. Stillwater isn't a big town. My trailer sits on a quiet stretch outside city limits, where the neighbors don't ask questions. I like it that way. Some days I sit on the porch, coffee in one hand, cane in the other, and wonder if anyone remembers. I tried not to complain, tried not to think too hard about how things used to be. But after that appointment with Langford, I couldn't let it go. Something in me had cracked, not just the bone, but the silence I'd lived with for too long. That evening I called Lisa. She picked up quick. She always does. "Hey, Dad," she said. "How was the appointment?" I told her what the doctor said. About the chart. About not being tough anymore. There was a pause on the line. "That's not right," she said quietly. "You've had pain since Kandahar. Since you got home. They never did a full scan." I told her no. Never anything deeper than the standard. Nobody ever ordered it. Nobody ever looked past the surface. "I think we need to get your full records," she said. "From the VA. From your deployments. Everything." I didn't argue. Lisa's a nurse at a VA facility in Kansas. She knows the system. Knows where the cracks are, and how people fall through them. Over the next 2 weeks, we worked together. She drove down once, helped me organize what I had. A plastic bin full of yellowed documents, old military orders, and photocopied discharge papers. We submitted formal requests, called hotlines, filled out forms that hadn't been updated in 20 years. There were delays. There always are. We're still processing, they told her. That archive isn't digitized yet. One man even told her the records didn't exist. Sometimes they just get lost, he said, like that was explanation enough. But Lisa kept digging. She found 2 versions of the same report, one in the clinic database, one deep in a backup VA archive. The first said, no trauma observed. Just that. As if the night in Kandahar had been a walk through a park. The second one, the original, told a different story. Vertebral fractures, spinal compression, consistent with high-stress load-bearing and blast trauma. It was signed by a field medic and countersigned by a battalion physician. It was dated 2 days after the blast. The false one had been added much later. Same date stamp, different content. Lisa looked at me from across the table. Her face had gone pale. Dad, she said slowly, they changed your records. I didn't say anything at first, just stared at the 2 reports laid side by side on the kitchen table. My name at the top of both. One told the truth, the other erased it. They've been using the fake one, Lisa said. Every time you get seen. That's why they won't take you seriously. And just like that, I understood. All the years of shrugs, the dismissals, the casual smirks. It wasn't just bad luck, it was policy. She sat back in her chair, arms crossed. I've seen this before, she said. They sanitize files to cut costs, to avoid approving long-term care. If we hadn't found the original, they would have kept doing it forever. I felt the weight of it settle on my chest. 30 years of service, and this was the return. A system built to forget. But I wasn't going to be forgotten. Not this time. Lisa printed both versions of the report. She made a copy of the field notes too. The medic's scrawl about spinal compression, the dates, the notations in pen that hadn't been erased yet by someone with a digital signature and a quiet agenda. We sat in silence, the only sound the ticking of the clock on the wall. How many others, you think? I asked. She didn't answer. Just looked down. There's a certain kind of anger that doesn't burn hot. It freezes you still. That's what I felt. Not rage, just clarity. A knowing that something had been taken from me. Not just treatment, not just recognition, but truth. Lisa got to work. She knew how to speak their language. She contacted a VA compliance officer she trusted, Carla Howard, a woman who'd done whistleblower work before. Lisa didn't say much, just sent the files with a note. Compare these. Something is wrong. Carla called back 2 days later. I heard her voice through the phone on speaker. Mr. Mitchell, she said, steady and slow, what we're looking at is very serious. And not isolated. I want to help. I told her I didn't want to start a war. I just wanted the truth to stand. She said, sometimes truth is the only kind of war that matters. From that point, it moved fast. Carla brought in an inspector from the VA Office of Accountability. Lisa reached out to a journalist she'd once worked with, a woman named Brianna Cole, who'd done a series on VA mismanagement last year. Lisa said, she'll know what to do with this. I didn't expect what came next. I thought it'd be quiet. A hearing, maybe. A letter of correction. But once Brianna saw the documents, she asked to meet me. I don't want to exploit your story, she said. But I think people need to know. This isn't just your pain. It's a pattern. We met at the Stillwater Diner. Same place I go for breakfast every Tuesday. I wore my cleanest shirt, ironed it with a hot pan the night before. Lisa sat next to me. I did most of the talking, but she filled in the blanks when my memory stuttered. Brianna took notes in a little leather-bound pad. Didn't record anything. I want to remember how you say things, she told me. Not how they sound through a microphone. I told her about Kandahar, about the walk, about the silence afterward, and I told her about every time I sat in a room with a doctor and knew, deep down, they didn't see me as someone who mattered. When I finished, she closed her notebook and looked at me the way people look when they understand something heavy. Not pity, just respect. A week later, she called to tell me the story would run. But before that, before the article hit, Lisa said we needed to go back to the clinic, back to Dr. Lang. She asked if I was ready. I told her, I've been ready for 15 years. The day we returned to the Tulsa urgent care, I didn't come alone. Lisa drove. Carla met us there, a binder tucked under her arm. Brianna came too. Camera crew left behind at my request. If we're going to confront them, I said, I want it quiet. I want it true. The receptionist looked up as we walked in. I could see the recognition dawn in her eyes. She pressed a button under her desk. I don't know if it was for security or management. Dr. Langford emerged from a hallway, his coat unbuttoned, a tablet in one hand. He stopped cold when he saw us. Mr. Mitchell, he said, voice guarded. Back so soon? Lisa stepped forward first. She handed him 2 folders. Compare the records, she said, line by line. He opened them, frowned. The silence stretched long. I'm not sure what this is, he began. Carla stepped in. It's a falsified record. The original shows trauma. The copy you've been using omits it. The metadata proves the replacement was filed years after the injury. We've already opened an internal review. His face changed then. Not guilt, exactly. Just fear. Not for what he'd done, maybe, but for what it meant. This could be a clerical error, he said weakly. No, Lisa said. It's a pattern. I watched him deflate, paper thin. He didn't argue anymore. Brianna stood at the back, taking notes. Quiet, respectful. A witness. I didn't speak much. Didn't need to. Just looked at Langford and said, you said maybe I wasn't as tough as I used to be. But you never asked what I carried. We walked out 20 minutes later. No shouting. No drama. Just silence. Finally broken by truth. That night, Brianna's piece ran online. Erased injuries. One veteran's fight for truth. The headline didn't shout. It whispered, and people listened. Within days, the clinic's parent company announced an audit. Langford was placed on leave pending investigation. Carla told us that several similar cases had already surfaced. Veterans with unexplained rejections, missing documentation, altered diagnoses. A week later, the story went national. VA leadership issued a statement. Committees were formed, and slowly, quietly, people started calling me by name. I wasn't invisible anymore. For a long time, my name meant nothing to anyone outside of my daughter and the DMV. But after Brianna's article broke, people began to write. Emails, letters. A few even came through the post, handwritten with careful script, like the ones I used to get from my mother during basic. Mr. Mitchell, I read your story. My father went through something similar. My husband served in Iraq. His records vanished too. Thank you for speaking up. I never thought someone would say it out loud. One came from a nurse in Arizona. She said she'd seen 3 cases in her facility that mirrored mine. Notes rewritten, injuries sanitized. She didn't know who to tell until she read what happened to me. Some letters came from veterans, some from their kids, and some from strangers who said nothing more than, you're not invisible anymore. Lisa collected them all. She started a folder in her home office, labeling it, proof. Not proof of guilt, proof of change. But I didn't feel triumphant. Not yet. The VA launched a wider inquiry. Carla forwarded us a copy of the internal memo. It was terse, bureaucratic, laced with words like, discrepancy, systemic vulnerability, investigative priority. Beneath all that jargon was one hard truth. This wasn't about one man, or one file. It was a policy of neglect written into silence. A month after the story ran, I was asked to testify via video to a congressional subcommittee on veterans healthcare. Lisa set up the laptop, made sure the mic worked. The VA compliance rep briefed me, told me what to expect. But nothing prepared me for the weight of that camera light blinking red. The chairwoman asked me to state my name, my rank, and where I served. Sergeant First Class Harold Mitchell. Army, Panama, Gulf War, Afghanistan. Her voice was calm. Mr. Mitchell, can you tell us what brought you here today? I looked straight into the camera, into a room of men and women I couldn't see. I came because I hurt, I said. And I was told that pain was my imagination. I came because someone rewrote my history, and for years, I thought maybe they were right. I took a breath. My hands stayed steady. But they weren't. I carried a wounded man 5 miles through the dark. I shattered something in my back doing it. But I thought silence was service. Turns out, silence was just survival. I heard a pen click. Someone sniffed. On the screen, a young age shifted uncomfortably. I didn't come to ask for favors, I continued. I came to remind you that records aren't numbers. They're names. They're lives. And when you erase the truth from them, you don't just forget injuries. You forget people. There was a pause when I finished. Then a quiet, thank you for your service, Mr. Mitchell. And the feed cut. After that, I didn't hear much. Weeks passed. The storm died down. But the letters kept coming. A father from Ohio. A widow from Texas. A former Navy corpsman who said his best friend died of an untreated head wound because someone had crossed out a line on a form. Lisa said I had started something. I didn't feel like a symbol. Just a man who finally said enough. Then came a knock on the door. It was early April. A VA representative, dressed in civilian clothes, holding a thick envelope. Mr. Mitchell, he said, I'm here to deliver formal acknowledgement from the Department of Veterans Affairs. You were wrongfully denied care based on altered documentation. We're correcting your status. I took the envelope without a word. Inside were revised records, a personal letter from the Secretary of Veterans Affairs, and a document authorizing full retroactive benefits and medical review. But none of it felt as heavy as the last page. It was a restored copy of the 2007 report, the one from Kandahar, with the medic's signature, the diagnosis of vertebral fractures, the handwritten notation, Evac under own power with injured soldier. 5-mile transit under load. I stared at that page for a long time. It wasn't about money. Wasn't even about treatment. It was the acknowledgement that I hadn't imagined what I'd lived through. That my pain had a name. And that someone finally said, "Yes, we see you." Lisa stood behind me, hand on my shoulder. "He's real again," she said quietly. I don't know if that's how it felt, but I knew I could sleep that night without seeing Langford's face, or hearing his words. I knew I could look at the scars on my back and not question if they mattered. I was seen, and I wasn't alone. After the envelope came, things quieted down. No more reporters. No more calls. Just the slow return of routine. Mornings with coffee on the porch. The ache in my spine still there. But now it had a name, a reason. Lisa kept pushing. She was the one who filed a petition to open a regional review of veteran files in Oklahoma and Kansas. Carla supported it. Brianna published an op-ed titled, "Invisible No More: How One Veteran's Story Sparked Reform." It ran in 3 national outlets. But I didn't chase headlines. I went back to living quiet. Stillwater didn't change overnight, but people did start to nod when they saw me at the store. The clerk at the pharmacy called me Sergeant now, not sir. One afternoon, a high school kid knocked on my trailer door, said he was writing a paper on veterans' healthcare and asked if I'd talk to him. I told him the truth. Most of the war never made it home. What made it home is the weight of it. He wrote that down like it meant something. Lisa came by more often, brought groceries, cleaned out the fridge. She was quieter now too, less urgent. We'd sit at the table and go through more records. Mine, others. She had found nearly a dozen veterans in Kansas alone with files that didn't match what they remembered. One man, a Gulf War infantry medic, had been denied benefits for spinal injuries, not consistent with combat exposure. But his original file, filed in 1991, clearly documented a collapsed trench wall and blunt trauma. The replacement document was dated 6 years later. Another woman, Army Logistics, had 2 files, one that mentioned a concussion from an RPG blast, another that stated she complained of migraines with no source. She hadn't been able to afford treatment for years. It was a pattern. Rewriting the truth. Cutting away pain with a keyboard and a form letter. I told Lisa, "It's not just about me anymore." She smiled at that. "It never was, Dad." The VA's regional office began formal inquiries. Carla forwarded me updates, staff terminations, system audits, congressional oversight meetings. One memo used the word, corrective justice. I didn't know what that meant. Not really. Justice doesn't come on paper. It comes in silence lifted, in names remembered. Then came the invitation. A ceremony, they called it. Quiet, closed door, in D.C., recognition of service and contribution to institutional reform. I didn't want to go. Told Lisa I didn't need a medal for surviving. She said, "It's not a medal. It's a seat in the room." I wore my old dress blues. They still fit. Mostly. We flew out together, Lisa and me. First time I'd been on a plane in years. I sat stiff the whole time, not because of fear, but because of the pain that never really left. That old IED still traveled with me, in bone and blood. At the Capitol, we were escorted through side halls. No cameras, no crowd, just a long table in a quiet room and a few names I recognized from the news. The Secretary of Veterans Affairs stood and spoke my name. Sergeant First Class Harold Mitchell. "Your testimony helped uncover a system of diagnostic falsification that has affected countless veterans nationwide. Your persistence revealed more than an error. It exposed a pattern. We are here today to say, we see you. We remember." I didn't speak. I just stood and nodded. Afterward, a young woman from the office handed me a single sheet, an official acknowledgement of record correction, with a stamp and a signature. At the bottom was a single line, "We are sorry it took this long." I folded it slowly, slipped it into my coat. Later that night, Lisa and I walked the National Mall. It was near midnight. Quiet. The kind of quiet that lets you hear your own breath. We stopped by the Vietnam Memorial. I hadn't seen it before. I ran my fingers over the names. Black granite, smooth and cool. I didn't know any of the names there personally, but I knew the weight of what they carried, of what they left behind. Lisa didn't say anything. She didn't need to. We stood there until the wind picked up. Back home in Stillwater, things returned to quiet again. But this time, it felt different. Not empty, just still. People came by sometimes. Young men. One had served in Syria, another from Iraq. They sat on my porch and talked, or didn't. One of them cried, said he'd been told his PTSD didn't count because it wasn't accompanied by physical trauma. I showed him my folder, told him how long it took to be believed, told him to fight anyway. "You'll lose a lot before you win," I said, "but you keep standing, even if it's slow, even if it hurts." He stayed until sundown. That's what life became, a kind of quiet ministry, not of faith, but of presence. Because sometimes you don't need to fix everything. Sometimes, You just need to be the proof that it can be done. Late spring brought something unexpected. A letter arrived, official seal, thick envelope, from the office of the Inspector General. It wasn't about my case. It was a request. Would I serve as an advisor for a new oversight initiative focused on historical record integrity within the VA system? I read it twice before saying anything. Lisa sat across the table, nursing a cup of coffee. You don't have to, she said softly. You've done enough. I looked at her, at the binder of cases growing on her bookshelf, at the photos she'd started collecting, veterans she'd helped, stories she was preserving. Some still alive, some who weren't. No, I said, this is part of the fight too. So I said yes. It wasn't a job. It didn't come with a title or a desk. It came with questions, phone calls, document reviews. They asked me to sit in on a few panels, to read drafts of reform protocols. I kept my voice low and my comments simple. They don't need more forms, I said in one meeting. They need more faces. People need to remember there's someone behind the paper. They listen. Not always, not perfectly, but they listen. Brianna visited again that summer. She brought a photographer and asked if she could take a portrait. I said only if Lisa was in it too. We stood outside the trailer, just under the tin awning, the Oklahoma sky behind us open and clean. She asked if there was anything I wanted people to understand. Pain isn't always loud, I told her. Sometimes it's just the way a man moves when no one's watching. The article ran in a magazine this time, national print. On the cover, the headline, "The Quiet Ones Who Remember." It wasn't just about me. It was about the pattern, about the men and women still trying to be heard. In the months that followed, I saw change start to take shape. The VA implemented a new archival verification system. 2 sets of eyes on every record revision, automated checks against historic scans. They began reaching out to veterans flagged in audit reviews. I knew of at least 20 whose cases were reopened. 6 of them were from Lisa's list. Still, there was resistance. Some in the system thought it was an overreaction. A few tried to bury the momentum in red tape. But every time someone stalled, a story would resurface. Another voice, another name. The silence was broken now. And once it's broken, it doesn't go back. I started keeping a journal again. Not for memory, mine was already fraying at the edges, but for legacy. I wrote down the story of Kandahar, of the pain that came after, of the years in between. And I wrote about the day Lisa found the real record. Truth has weight, I wrote. It waits for the right hands. Lisa found a publisher willing to print the collected testimonies. She called the project Restored. I didn't want my name on the cover. She insisted. It started with you, she said. That matters. We launched the book at the Stillwater Community Center. Small turnout, folding chairs, a pot of weak coffee. But there were veterans there, and their families. And when Lisa read a passage aloud, my words, in her voice, every face in the room still. Afterward, a young man in a hoodie approached me. I didn't think anyone gave a damn, he said. But maybe I was wrong. You weren't wrong, I wanted to tell him. But maybe you're not alone either. Later that summer, the American Legion reached out. They asked if I'd speak at their fall gathering. Just a few words on service, remembrance, healing. I stood on a plywood stage under an open tent, wind whipping at the sides. My voice shook a little, but I said what I needed to. I don't remember everything I saw in combat, but I remember who I carried. I remember who didn't come back. And I remember how long it took for someone to believe what stayed behind. I looked out at the sea of worn hats and old faces. I'm not asking for sympathy. I'm asking for accountability, for dignity, for memory that doesn't come too late. People stood. Some clapped. Some saluted. I stepped down quietly. I never liked being on a stage. But that moment, it meant something. Not just to them. To me. It meant I wasn't erased. I wasn't just a file in a drawer, misfiled and forgot. I was part of the living memory again. Lisa hugged me afterward. Proud of you, she whispered. I didn't say it back. I didn't need to. That evening, we sat by the lake just outside town. The water was still, the air warm with the last breath of summer. We didn't speak. Just watched the reflection of the trees ripple and reform. Somewhere, a flag cracked against a pole in the breeze. And for the first time in a long time, I felt at peace, not because the pain had gone, but because it had been seen, because I wasn't invisible anymore, and I wasn't the only one. Now, most mornings, I wake before the sun. Old habit. The pain is still there. The cane waits at the foot of the bed like a quiet sentinel. But something in me has shifted. I'm not waiting for the world to see me anymore. I know who I am. The folder with my corrected file sits in the top drawer of my desk, just beneath a photograph of Callahan, the kid I carried through the dark. Lisa framed it for me last year. He's older now, married, 2 children, still calls on Christmas. Sometimes I wonder what would have happened if I hadn't carried him. If I'd stopped, let the pain take me down. But I didn't. And maybe that's the real story. Not the injury, not the falsified files, not even the hearings or the headlines. Maybe it's this. Pain doesn't make you weak. Silence does. And when silence becomes policy, the only way forward is to speak. I don't carry weapons anymore. I carry names. Men I served with. Women Lisa's help. Stories still buried, still rising. Sometimes, courage looks like charging a hill. And sometimes, it looks like opening a file folder and saying, no, this isn't right. So if anyone asks what happened to Harold Mitchell, tell them this. He fought quietly. He told the truth. And he refused to disappear.